Hello and welcome everybody to today's post daily news update. My name is Wai Ting. I am here because John Pollock is currently on assignment. He is somewhere out in Toronto gathering interviews, speaking to very important people at Collision conference that is taking place in Toronto. Of course, notable for wrestling fans because Tony Khan this morning gave a presentation. So John Pollock was there. You can follow his timeline for any notable things. So you may even hear a little bit of a conversation between John Pollock and Eastern Time. But sitting in his chair is Nate Milton. Thank you so much, Nate, for joining me. Very late notice last night. Appreciate it.
Yes, I think this is one of the few times where our shared insomnia, shall I say, way kind of played into our favor because you sent out the signal and I happened to be up to receive it. But yes, so shout out to John. You know, he's doing good work out there. And I'm glad I was able to come off the bench and pinch hit for Brother Pollock today.
It's always appreciated. This is a quick turnaround for appearances between Nate Milton on from Friday and also today. But this is good because I definitely want to get some of your thoughts following up on our conversation about Vince McMahon on Friday. But first of all, in addition to that story, we have kind of our latest little bit of development here, and that is in regards to John Laurinaitis and Bruce Prichard, where Bruce Prichard last night after Raw went off the air, first reported by PW Insider and since confirmed by our own John Pollock. An internal memo was sent out to talent after Raw last night stating, John Laurinaitis has been placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of our board of directors' internal investigation. Bruce Prichard will serve as interim head of talent relations. Bruce will ensure a seamless operational transition with the talent relations team during this period. Thank you as always. Now, it's important to note that Bruce Prichard currently is also the executive director of both Raw and SmackDown, which essentially means that he's basically the creative lead, only second to Vince McMahon here. So my question to you, Nate, should one person have all this power?
I believe it was the philosopher Kanye West who once asked that question, Way. No one man should have all that power, particularly, not to shade on Bruce, but I feel like if we're going to put somebody in that position, maybe it should be somebody who's a little bit more forward thinking and little bit more looking towards the future versus somebody who's been there, done that. But in terms of the Laurinaitis of it all, I think this was just a natural move. Like, you can't be one of the subjects of an investigation and just be at your job like nothing happened. I think they had to get him out of there just for perception and maybe even for cohesiveness behind the scenes. So this was an expected move. I honestly thought they would have done it Friday, Way, when we were talking about the story. So maybe a bit of a surprise to see Bruce kind of slide back up in there, but not surprised to see Johnny Ace having to take a step back.
It's a move that once again reaffirms, Vince's circle only consists of so many people. Mm-hmm. And these are both men in Laurinaitis and Prichard who have exited and have returned into the company in very prominent roles. And in Prichard's case, first, getting that SmackDown executive director role, then advancing to Raw, and now seemingly, at least in the interim, head of talent relations as well. So, once you're in his circle, once he trusts you, I mean, he seemingly trusts you for quite a long time here. In your opinion, Nate, we do occasionally speculate on these types of shows. Can you see Laurinaitis making a return at the end of all this?
I mean, I can, just for the reason you just stated. Once you're in with Vince, you're always in, regardless of, what bumps you hit along the way. So I'll say if Vince makes it through this, Laurinaitis is probably going to make it through this, maybe in a diminished capacity. But as you said, one of the things about Vince that is admirable, maybe in a twisted sort of way, is his loyalty to his guys. And so I don't think he would leave Johnny by the wayside if he makes it through.
We shall see. It is a continuing developing story here, and Vince McMahon staying in the news very much so, with at least one more thing off of his plate, as he has, at least it was discovered and announced yesterday that Oliver Luck and Vince McMahon have settled their lawsuit over Luck's wrongful termination from the XFL, which began in 2020. The settlement terms are undisclosed. The case was scheduled to hit the trial on July 11th. Now, I'm no legal expert, but from what I have gathered, did not necessarily seem like the odds were much in McMahon's favor heading into trial at this point. And Nate, do you know XFL, a longtime fan expert? I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts regarding this and Oliver Luck. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, this is the real reason you called me here today, Wai, so that we could spend the next 20 minutes breaking down, dissecting this lawsuit between Oliver Luck and Vince McMahon. Being the preeminent DC Defenders fan at Post Wrestling, I'm glad that you called me. But when we talk about this, I feel like this ended up this way with the settlement because Vince is smart. Despite how we might feel about his product sometimes, Vince knows being in the midst of an investigation for one type of misconduct while also having an active court trial is not the best look. And so he'd rather have people see him on SmackDown or on Raw playing your lovable grandfather, like you said last night, Wai, versus Vince McMahon defended. Like, that's not the image he wants out there. And so I feel like this was probably the best move he could have made because, yeah, they most likely would have lost that court case because, and, I'm not deep into the weeds with the lawsuit, but from everything I've seen, everything I've read, everything I've heard, Oliver Luck did not do anything to warrant that termination.
The timing of it is absolutely very interesting. And I mean, I'm sure it 100% worked in Luck's favor here. No pun intended here. McMahon definitely has bigger fish to fry, and the potential media attention that a trial may have, put on him at this time is not necessarily the type of media attention that he's probably looking for. The type of media attention he's looking for is to walk out in front of his home crowd at all of these events and to be praised and, cheered by his adoring audience. Maybe not so much this trial. So one thing off his plate and maybe a few zeros off of the bank account as well.
Yes. And if I'm Vince McMahon, I consider that a sound investment to get me out of that image. Again, perception of me sitting in the courtroom. Like, I don't want that to be the picture of Vince McMahon that people have in their heads at this time.
Still on the Vince McMahon front, the man is, of course, the talk of the moment here. We have our ratings from Friday's edition of WWE SmackDown. Of course, this was the day when the news of him stepping down broke, followed immediately by the press release stating that Vince McMahon was to appear that evening on WWE SmackDown. And the results of that stunt paid off, with SmackDown topping Friday's programming in all of television with 2,290,000 viewers and a 0.57 in the demo, this courtesy of Brandon Thurston and Show Buzz Daily. What is a bit more interesting to study is the quarter hours, and this comes to us, of course, from Brandon Thurston at Brandon Thurston and WrestleNomics, where you can see the opening segment did very well, but it certainly did not top the evening. In fact, the show continued to grow, and the main event between Matt Riddle and Roman Reigns was, in fact, the top segment. Now, we can, try to speculate. Now, we should also remember Vince only appeared on TV for what, like 30 seconds?
Yeah,
so
if that.
So perhaps a lot of people decided to tune out, but maybe they were made aware of the main event and decided to tune in. Any thoughts from you, Nate?
So Friday, we talked about it a little bit when we, had our roundtable that day. I didn't think it was a good look for Vince, and I still don't think it was a good look for Vince, but he's managed to twist this into his own narrative. And, we saw it on SmackDown. We also saw it on Raw. But particularly when you talk about that SmackDown rating, I think it's because everybody wants to, whether they want to admit it in that way, everybody wants to stop by the side of the road and rubberneck and see the car crash. Everybody wants to see the circus when it comes to town. And even me, I got off of work at 9:00 last Friday. And the first thing I did when I got home was go on to YouTube and see what Vince said, all 30 seconds of it. And so, yeah, like it does not surprise me that people would be morbidly curious about what this man was going to say in the midst of all of this turmoil behind the scenes. I think the surprising thing, though, like you said, is that wasn't even the peak of the ratings. I basically ended up leaving SmackDown. Like I turned it on for a little bit to see if there were going to be any other extra commentary about what Vince has said. And as soon as I found out there wasn't, I've had something better to watch. But the fact that people stuck around to watch Roman and Riddle, to watch presumably Madcap Moss or whatever he was doing, like, I think maybe it ends up being a good thing in the long run that more people are kind of exposed to this out of this bad situation. But we'll see. Like, I don't know if this is something sustainable, particularly when we talk about Vince showing up on Raw unannounced. Like, is this something you can kind of do episode after episode, or will it just end up being the law of diminishing returns?
What have you thought about Vince's 2 appearances thus far? And how do you read it? Because it seems like there are different interpretations from everybody.
Yeah. My interpretation is twofold. Way. Number one, I think he wants to kind of control his narrative and spin it that, hey, I'm still here. You know, he wants to project that strength to not only the audience, but more importantly, the shareholders and the advertisers. Like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. We all good, baby. Don't mess with my money. We all good. The other thing, though, and I don't know if anybody's ever made this comparison, Vince McMahon is kind of like the Michael Jordan of professional wrestling, in that Michael Jordan, as great as he was, might be the pettiest human being alive, always needing to create obstacles, create enemies, even when there are no enemies there. And I think we've seen this over the years. Vince is kind of at his quote unquote best when there's an enemy, whether you're talking about the steroid tribe or, you know, WCW, where Vince cast himself, this millionaire cast himself as the underdog way, fighting against this evil billionaire and his corporation. You know, I feel like Vince is at his best when he sees himself in his own mind as the underdog. And that's a little bit of this too, where yes, it's partly because of the public perception he wants to put out, but I think deep down he's like, they want to fight me, I'll give them a fight. Way I'll show up week after week. You can't take me off of my own show. I think there's a little bit of that ego and that pettiness that drives Vince to do stuff like this.
No doubt, no doubt. It's I mean, he's always just been such a fascinating study because he, you know, I think operates so differently from how most people would. I mean, and that is definitely the source of his success. It's probably the source that is holding him back from even greater success to many people. But when faced with this sort of public scrutiny, we've seen him lash out in various ways, and this just seems to be the latest episode. So we continue to follow up with Vince and see whether or not he continues to make these appearances week after week.
Oh, well, I was going to ask you, Wade, because I know you talked about it a little bit last night with Kate, but do you feel like this was it? Like this weekend was kind of it for Vince's appearances?
I thought Friday was it. I thought Friday was it for sure. I said that on the show, and then the guy just pops up on Monday for no reason. I think until his he, like, what is he getting out of these, right?
What if he shows up on NXT tonight?
It might be the first time he he sticks around for an entire show. I don't know, man. The question is, if he shows up on Friday, if he shows up at the pay-per-view to do all this stuff, and I mean, I just look at it as like the guy who's like walking through the public square just to show his face, just to show that he's not afraid of whatever that is in front of him, and it's kind of crazy to think that that's his first instinct in the face of all of this, and not to mention just the potential. It's just I don't know if it's as good of a look to most people in the media as it might seem to him, but there is a big section of the audience that I think definitely thinks that this is great. Wow, look at him, standing in the face of pressure. I could relate to that. So I think he'll do it for as long as he deems necessary to garner the amount of support that he wants to, or maybe if he's just bored, he'll just decide to step out middle of the show.
And there's nobody, like, who's gonna tell Vince no? Like, even now, who is gonna say, like, boss, that's not a good idea? Like, nobody.
No, of course not. So in terms of ratings news, we move on to AEW Rampage, where things were a very different story. Or Rampage this Friday, 10 o'clock. Again, no competition from the NHL or the NBA from either of these shows. SmackDown did really well, but Rampage did really bad. Its worst 18-49 in history, second lowest viewership in history at 331,000, 0.10 in the demo. Again, the lowest 18 to 49 demo in its history. This, of course, featured Jon Moxley versus Dante Martin. Who am I thinking of? Willow Nightingale versus Jade Cargill, and main event that it's slipping my mind at this moment, but maybe rightfully so, because Bobby Fish versus Darby Allin. Listen, all great
Darby,
matches. Yep. Did you watch the show? Do you have what's your sense about, like, the temperature on Rampage at this point?
Yeah, I would say the temperature on Rampage is lukewarm at best right now, and I don't know if it's just the appetite of the audience, or if looking at this Friday in particular, if the Vince McMahon stuff sucked all the oxygen out of the room and people didn't have any time for Rampage, which, as you mentioned, was a good show. Like, and I went back and caught it, and for the most part, I thought that it was a solid show. Love seeing Willow Nightingale get some shine. Obviously, I was there for the return of that man called Sting, Wai. But I don't know about Rampage. Like, Dynamite still feels like a big deal. Like, you have to catch it every week. I don't know if Rampage feels like that. And honestly, outside of Punk, when he returned, I don't know if Rampage has ever really kind of felt like that can't miss show. Like, it's a good show, but I don't know if it's appointment television. And particularly on a night where everybody's so focused on what Vince is doing, I don't think people had time for Rampage.
It's a very interesting question, the Vince McMahon effect on Rampage. I will say, covering the shows, usually SmackDown is the slow one. SmackDown is the one that I'm kind of waiting to get through to get to Rampage, which is very high paced. Tonight, between Vince and also the Riddle versus Reigns championship match, Rampage in comparison just did not feel all that relevant. So it does make you wonder, did that play a big part in it? Dynamite ratings took a dip, but I mean, all of TV took a dip with the sports on last Wednesday. So we shall see if Rampage bounces back or if this was an aberration. And we'll see if Tony Khan responds appropriately. Does he decide to stack Rampage today? Can he stack Rampage? Does he have enough talent, I suppose, to what can make a difference? What draws you to Rampage?
Here's the thing, Wai. What draws me to Rampage is not necessarily anything that Tony Khan is doing in terms of programming. It's life, right? Like, how hard was my Friday in terms of work? How busy was my week? Wednesday, I can make time for Dynamite. That's right in the middle of the work week. It's a time, at 8:00 that, I can do this. Whereas with Rampage, it's on a Friday and it's a little bit later. And if I don't feel like watching Rampage, I don't feel obligated in a way that I do with Dynamite. So I think, you can jazz up the card a bit, put some more big names on it. But ultimately, I feel like the time slot is kind of the biggest hindrance to Rampage. And maybe honestly, Wai, speaking, I just had a moment of clarity there. Maybe I'm not the target demo for Rampage. Granted, I'm a fan of the AEW stuff, but maybe it's for the Andrew Thompsons of the world. That got that energy, the energy Wai. Maybe it's for a little bit younger demo than I am. I'm starting to realize maybe I'm not at the top of the demo, but I'm closer to the top than I was 10, 15 years ago.
You are within 18 to 49, and I would I would assume that you are exactly the demo, Nate, the type of fan that is on the cusp.
I'm a lot closer to 49 than 18, no way.
Nonetheless, you are still in, okay, at least for a few more years. And you are exactly the type of fan that I think they're looking for, the type of fan that watches Dynamite regularly, who has to debate once in a while whether or not to watch Rampage. He obviously would want everybody who watches Dynamite to watch Rampage, if not more than that, right? At this point, it's unrealistic to expect a CM Punk, to debut on every Rampage. It's unrealistic to expect title matches, or at least significant title matches, to take place on every Rampage. We saw this week, Jon Moxley being on the show wasn't enough. Is it something else? Is it something more story related that's necessary? Is it or is it at this point, the curiosity has just kind of been off of Rampage, and people know exactly what they're going to get and they don't necessarily need it?
And we're also we're starting to get into the summer. So I'm going to be interested in how these Friday night ratings hold up when people got, long weekends, or people are going on trips. So, people got other things to do than watch TV live in the moment. But I guess, Wade, the ultimate question is, what does the network think? What does Time Warner think? Because these ratings this past Friday weren't great, but how do they compare with you running The Accountant again, or with you running episode 2, Attack of the Clones again? Like, what do those ratings look like in comparison to what you got from Rampage?
It's a very good question, and one that'll obviously affect negotiations whenever it comes up, and potentially conversations about a third product in a Ring of Honor as well in the future. So that is the ratings news. Kushida, our favorite jacket wearing time splitter, has recently returned to New Japan Professional Wrestling here this morning on New Japan Road event at a sold-out Korakuen Hall. Taiji Ishimori successfully defended the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship against Hiromu Takahashi before being interrupted during his show closing address by 6-time Junior Heavyweight Champion Kushida, making his return to the promotion after a 3-year plus stint in NXT. Kushida let the crowd know that he just signed a contract to, quote, spend the rest of my wrestling life in New Japan Pro Wrestling. That translation courtesy of NJPW1972.com. Backstage, Kushida elaborated, stating, I literally just signed my New Japan contract. Right now, I'm still living in Orlando, Florida, but I'll be moving to Los Angeles to make it easier to travel back and forth between there and Japan. I want to use the benefit of my experience and put the rest of my efforts in pro wrestling life into furthering New Japan around the world. Nate Milton, your thoughts on Kushida returning to New Japan, first of all, re-entering the junior heavyweight division, and how much it must suck to fly back and forth between LA and Tokyo as somebody who used to live in Japan.
Yes. So, first of all, full disclosure, I'm not too up on current New Japan. It's something that I watch, but it's a lot of wrestling out there to watch, Wai Ting. But I am invested in this story with Kushida because I feel like if he is happy with this, then I am happy for him, because I don't know how well he was served by his previous employer. And that's maybe a larger conversation about how that employer has served, folks from Japan in the past. But if he's happy, I'm happy. I think that travel, man, like I made that trip 3 times, going over, coming back to visit, 4 times, going over, coming back to visit somebody during the holidays, going back, and then coming back to America for good. So it is a long trip. I'm sure he's got the best accommodations, though, on those flights, the hot towels with the lemon water. I'm sure they treating Kushida good. But the thing that's more interesting to me, Wai, is how does Kushida coming back play into this expansion of New Japan that people have been talking about for the last few years? Because he's somebody who I feel like with that NXT exposure, you could, use him as one of your guys that can be kind of this ambassador to a North American audience. So I think that aspect might be the most intriguing thing, because we know the dude can wrestle. We know he's good. How will they use him this time around versus when he was there before?
You bring up a great point I didn't really consider when it comes to Kushida moving from Orlando to LA. First of all, Karen Peterson, hello in the chat room. She says LA to Tokyo is a lot shorter than Orlando to Tokyo. So that's a bit of a relief, saving him about like 3 to 4 hours per trip. Sure. But it also puts him in, of course, closer to the LA dojo. And I sensed a lot of disappointment from people upon seeing Kushida. I mean, a lot of happiness that he's back in New Japan, but disappointment that he did not make a move to the heavyweight division and instead seems to be going for the junior heavyweight championship again. How excited can we get about a 7th title win, right? But I mean, it certainly is a bit of a missed opportunity, because I think with the LA dojo there, you could assume that he could potentially be a franchise player for that sub brand. And what a perfect way to get him to challenge for that open weight or the Tom Lawler's championship, potentially holding that belt, using that belt as the transitional championship for him to eventually enter the heavyweight division. So doesn't look to be the case. You would assume that maybe New Japan really wants him to hold up this junior heavyweight division. Hopefully, maybe it means Hiromu is free now to move up. But yeah, that seems to be Kushida's place right now. And we shall see how he does. So that is the
It
latest.
almost feels like all those times in TNA, going back to our conversation Friday way, where the reset for the X division was always AJ Styles. Doesn't matter how old AJ Styles is, how long he's been there. We gonna throw AJ Styles back in there because at least we know he got the goods and he can lead us through this rocky patch. And maybe that's what they're doing with Kushida.
Rory here is really amazed to learn that you used to live in Japan. And that is true.
I think I've told that story multiple times, so I'm glad that there's someone out there at least who hasn't heard my my trip to Japan story. And maybe that's a story I will tell on another post show on another day.
Also from New Japan Road, we have another bit of news here where Tomohiro Ishii defeated Clark Connors to enter the Fatal 4-Way final for the AEW All-Atlantic Championship at Forbidden Door this Sunday. Ishii is set to meet Pac, Miro, and the winner of Penta Obscuro versus Malachi Black, which is to be determined on Dynamite this Wednesday. Nate, what is your interest, first of all, in this All-Atlantic Championship tournament, and secondly, Forbidden Door in general?
I'll start with Forbidden Door. Here's the thing, Wai, like, and I don't want this the smoke out here on these Twitter streets, man. But I'm not excited for Forbidden Door. I think I'll watch it and I'll be impressed by the action that I'm getting on that show. But if you were to ask, like, where am I at right now, my excitement level for what we're actually going to get is less than my excitement when this concept was first announced. If that makes sense, Wai. Like, what we're actually getting is cool, but it's less than what I was hoping for. But I'm sure I'll enjoy it. In terms of the championship, I think that match is going to be killer. Like, regardless of whether it's Penta or Malachi, I think Malachi most likely is the choice to put in that match. I think that match is going to maybe even steal the show with those talents in there.
Yes, 100%. I mean, even without Ishii, I mean, it was going to be a hot match, but I think I totally agree with you that Forbidden Door, based on concept versus I think the result that we're getting, it might be a little bit lacking, primarily because I think it's missing that one big dream match, and we will touch on whether or not we may get that announcement on Wednesday. But we Punk versus Tanahashi, I think, was supposed to fill a big spot. Moxley versus Tana, after the promo on Wednesday, I think elevated a lot of people's expectations. We know the match is going to be fantastic. Yeah. But is it attractive enough to hold up the card? Not really sure. But a big question, of course, is where is Okada? Is he actually not going to appear? Or was that just all a bit of a diversion here? Where's Tetsuya Naito? Where's LIJ? When you propose the idea of brand versus brand,
yes,
people are thinking about the very best, and it's very difficult. I think maybe this is the type of show where audiences, number one, had to temper their expectations a little bit, but secondly, it's a bit of a halfway meeting point. So,
yeah.
Maybe just kind of, before we continue the conversation about Forbidden Door, our final little bit of news here is Bryan Danielson has been announced by AEW to appear on Dynamite tomorrow, where he will address his status at Forbidden Door, as well as Blood and Guts taking place on next week's edition of Dynamite. Of course, Zack Sabre Jr. recently challenged Danielson in a backstage interview at Dominion. And we have received a little bit of reciprocation in the form of Excalibur on Rampage asking William Regal on commentary about Zack Sabre Jr.'s comments. So presumably, Bryan will be appearing to, you would think, confirm his participation in both of them. Could it be anything but that, Nate?
It'd be so great if he just showed up and was like, you know what? I appreciate the offer, but I'm just not interested, guys.
And John Cena will be on Raw on Monday,
Yeah. I got other things going on in my life right now. But yes, I do think this is what we're going to get, Wai. And, I just talked about my interest level for Forbidden Door. You throw that on that card and it takes it up another notch. So I'm hoping this is what we get.
Yeah, me too. Of course, number one is the safety of Bryan Danielson. We don't exactly know what the injury is, but we know he has a history of concussion issues. So hopefully he is healed up and good to go. But yeah, Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. is one of those dream matches that I think would certainly bolster the card. But still, you have the question of where Okada is, where Tetsuya Naito and LIJ are. And Dynamite is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting because it is the go home show for Forbidden Door, and there are potentially a lot of matches left to be announced, and we shall see. One last thing here, and not much we can discuss here, but really just NXT taking place tonight.
Main event time, ladies and gentlemen. Main event time. This is about to become. I didn't know you were going to surprise me with this, Wai Ting.
Yeah, sorry.
Tony D in the building, my guy.
Are you keeping up with NXT?
No way. Here's the thing. And this is no slander on the talent involved in NXT, but its current incarnation just is not for me, and I think Chris over on the NWA podcast can state it even more firmly than I just did. Like, it's just not for me. That being said, like, there are people that I dig in NXT and I wish the best for them. And for whatever reason, Tony D is one of those dudes, like, intellectually, Wai, I know this is a terrible gimmick, man. This is an outdated stereotype. Intellectually, I shouldn't like it. But there's something about, and maybe it's the commitment to the performer. I just love Tony D and his boys, so I'm here for Tony D, man.
I like him too. The thing is, NXT 2.0 is like where people go to bring their party tricks onto national television, and Tony D'Angelo feels really like just this dude's like party trick where he does an impression of a stereotypical Italian man, and boom, that's going to be your gimmick that you're going to present to hundreds and thousands of people. But he does a great job at it, and the point of, I think, NXT 2.0 is to show personality. He's certainly been able to do that strong enough to the point where he's able to lead his own faction. So I believe this is a pre-taped show, so I believe the two stacks will still may appear on this one. But yes, Tony D'Angelo takes on Carmelo Hayes in a North American title match. That seems to be the main event. We also have Solo Sikoa versus Grayson Waller and Alba Fire taking on Lash Legend, as well as Idris Enofe taking on Cameron Grimes. So that is NXT tonight. Our friends at the BDE at Up Next podcast, we'll have a review of that later on this evening.
And possibly an appearance by Vincent Kennedy McMahon. You never know.
It would be a surprise, even in a pre-tape. He'll make his way in there somehow. Nate, it has been such a pleasure for you to be on the show, to always get your thoughts on professional wrestling. Where can people this weekend hear a lot more from you in professional wrestling?
Thank you for sending out the invite, Wai. Fun as always, brother. If you want to hear more from me, check out the Nubian Wrestling Advocates. We are back and better than ever. A new episode dropping this weekend, and I guess I can spoil the surprise now, and also legally contract our guest to appear. But Rich Fan from The Torch will be joining Chris, Andrew, and myself to discuss the biggest news from the past few weeks in the world of professional wrestling. So the NWA podcast, it's myself, Andrew, and Chris, and we talk about pro wrestling from the lens of Black journalists, media members, fans. We've had performers on, so glad to be getting back into the swing of things with those fellas so that we can talk about everything going on. I know, like, I haven't even talked with Chris much this week, but I know he's got 20 minutes easy on this whole Vince McMahon thing. And much like Michael Jordan, I mentioned him earlier, Wai, when the professor gets on a roll, you just ISO. You get out of the way, give him the ball, and let him do work. So stay tuned for that this weekend. And I'm really excited for the conversation that we're gonna have with Rich Fan, Wai, because Rich, as you know, always funny and insightful and brings the heat on these shows. So stay tuned for the Nubian Wrestling Advocates, y'all.
You may not have a chance to speak directly to Chris, but he has a chance to speak to you, as the man just recently sent a super chat here from Chris from LA, who sends $10. Thank you for the support, as always, Professor. He says, I had to disagree with my bro, Nate. I do not think that the loyalty train with Vince is forever in every case. Just look at the Hebners and the Brooklyn Brawler. Vince will fire Ma Sucka. Chrissy Lee. I think he wrote that just for me to say it. Chris also says, sends in $3 to say NXT 2.0 is hot garbage. Any thoughts on either of these, Nate?
There are limits, I guess, to Vince's loyalty, but the guys that are in are pretty much in. But then with like Chris, like, we know NXT 2.0 just isn't for us, but I can't say with good conscience that Tony D doesn't make me laugh. Or like Wendy Chu way, like in my head, like that's a ridiculous gimmick for this talented performer, but she plays the hell out of it, and I enjoy her portrayal of that gimmick. So yes, there's a lot of silly, cheesy, over the top stuff in NXT 2.0 that I do not watch, only in clip form after the fact. But we're not gonna get on here on Al Gore's internet, Chris Ely, and besmirch that man Tony D'Angelo and what he brings to the table, sir.
I look forward to what you guys have to say about a lot, because I know you guys have a lot to catch up on.
Oh, speaking of, since Chris is here, and I just hijacked the Daily News way. Since Chris is here, I know you're listening, brother. I know you're watching. This Saturday, this weekend, we're gonna be talking about that man almost qualified for Money in the Bank, brother.
And he's gonna win.
I'm saying it right now. Almost is gonna win Money in the Bank. That's my prediction. Hashtag Homo sapiens. Y'all stand up. The almost era has begun.
Oh boy, goodness. Cardiff can use SummerSlam can use a new main event. Cardiff can use a new main event. WrestleMania can use it. Forget Reigns versus The Rock. We need Omos versus Dwayne. One last super chat here comes to us from Jake from the Windy City. Thank you as always for the support, Jake. He sends in $5 to say, what's also insane is that in the midst of all this, Bruce still finds time for his Something to Wrestle podcast with Conrad. Yeah, that is insane. John, Nate, juggling a podcast recording schedule with a real shoot job can't be easy. So
yeah. Like I all the respect in the world to Bruce. Well, not all the respect in the world, but most of the respect in the world. I'll limit my respect for Brother Prichard, but yeah, like it's not an easy grind.
Thank you so much, Nate, for being here. As I mentioned, John Pollock will not be back for the post-daily news, but we will hear a little bit of his conversation with Tony Khan. So do check that out. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time, back with me for the post-daily news update. We have Ask Away coming out for Post Wrestling Cafe patrons at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So subscribe to the Patreon for that, where we answer a bunch of your questions for a good, solid 80 to 90 minutes, I believe, this month. So go and check that out. And then follow at Nate Milton, at Nate 8. I keep screwing this up. At N, the number 8, MOZAIK. You ever think about changing it, Nate?
Never, because here's the thing, and I won't tell my Japan story, but I will tell the story behind my handle. So Mosaic came from two things. Number one, the Green Lantern Mosaic comic, which is a Jon Stewart-based comic, which is one of my favorite comic book runs of all time, even if the author turned out to be a terrible human being. Green Lantern Mosaic is one of my favorite comic stories of all time. And then also I used to be in, and this way, I used to be in a band called Glowing Moses. And so one of the definitions for the word mosaic is coming from Moses. And so I was like, you know what? Just throw a little 8 in my name, get it spelled phonetically, a little mosaic, bam. And so I will never change it unless somebody pays me to change it. Then, everybody's got a price. All things are negotiable.
I like it. I like the sticking to something that you've come up with originally. I'm the same at Way0937. Confusing as it may be, I'm going to keep it for now. So thank you to everybody joining us in the live chat, and thank you to everybody listening to this after the fact. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.